everyone and welcome to this video. Now today I'm going to be taking a look at this album here. It is From Langley Park to Memphis by Prefab Sprout. So I'll just be doing the usual thing in this video, giving a bit of background information about the album, then showing you my vinyl copy of it here, and then looking at each of the album songs in detail, as well as all of the singles which were released from the album. So this was Prefab Sprout's third studio album, released on the 14th of March in 1988. So this followed some nearly 3 years after their last album, the acclaimed Steve McQueen. So after making that album, the band had reconvened quickly and had intended to release a follow-up album entitled Protest Songs, sort of like in like the same year, like towards like the end of 1985. Like the kind of idea was like not let hype build for like the follow-up like to Steve McQueen. So yeah, like they quickly recorded this album Protest Songs. However, the release of that was slightly thwarted by the success of a reissue of one of the Steve McQueen singles like When Love Breaks Down. So the record company very much didn't want the band to have a single in the charts which wasn't on their new album like that had like just come out. So the album was pulled, and instead that Protest Songs album would sit on the shelf for a further 4 years until 1989. So after kind of touring and kind of promotional duties for Steve McQueen had kind of finished, they decided to start work on a new album at some time in 1987. They made a conscious decision, regrouping, not to revisit any of the tracks that had been laid down for like the Protest Songs album, and instead work up a new batch of songs. Instead of using a single producer for the album, Paddy McAloon, like lead songwriter and singer, initially wanted to use a different producer for every song. However, quite quickly they realised that this would be quite unworkable and also very costly. So, like as a kind of compromise, a Steve McQueen producer Thomas Dolby agreed to work on 4 tracks on this album with the band, as he had various other kind of like work commitments. I think he was doing some film work like around this time. The remaining tracks were produced by John Kelly, who was a well-established producer, worked with the likes of Kate Bush, and even I think he did some work on Paul McCartney's Ram album like in like the early 70s, but like kind of like was still a contemporary producer like around this time, working with the likes of Deacon Blue and The Beautiful South. And then we also had one track produced by a guy called Andy Richards, who was probably most famous for working alongside Frankie Goes to Hollywood on some of their big singles, and also one track produced by McAloon himself. So yeah, multiple producers, multiple recording locations for this album as well, with their native Newcastle as well as London and LA being the locations where it was recorded. There was definitely an attempt with this album, which you can kind of tell as much through the cover, to kind of make a more accessible record, you know, that with McAloon remarking like at the time, "I've realised that a good simple song is better than a half-successful complicated one." So very much a statement of intent of trying to just go for like the kind of commercial mainstream, which certainly paid off in terms of the success of the album like as a whole, but also one of the singles like in particular that we'll get to. So yeah, the album peaked at number 5 on the UK charts, and it would be Prefab Sprout's commercial peak. Like the only way was down from here really for them. However, the critical response was slightly more mixed, with this tilt towards the mainstream certainly not going unnoticed by the critics, with many being particularly critical of the album's production, if not like the quality of McAloon's songwriting, with like the Enemy saying that the production is sickly and cluttered, while Cream magazine said that the songwriting was done a great disservice by ill-fitting arrangements. However, though, like other publications would rate this album highly, Record Mirror ranked it as the 5th best album of 1988. And it was also a record that Paddy McAloon was very proud of, like, as well. He said, like, at the time that he's not wrote a better bunch of songs than it, and it would be, like, the favourite, and like he said that it was his favourite record of his, although I'm not sure if that has changed, like, since time, like, as Prefab Sprout have released, like, quite a few albums, like, since this one. So, yeah, following, like, its release, the band basically did a lot of promotion for the album in terms of TV appearances. However, they decided not to actually tour the album. Instead, they would work up, like, even more material for the ambitious album Jordan the Comeback, which I think has nearly 21 tracks on it, released like only 2 years later in 1990. So I wish I'd show you my vinyl copy of it here. This is my uncle's original copy of it. He was a quite a big fan, like, of Prefab Sprout. He had all of their studio albums up to Jordan the Comeback, this is the cover here. Yeah, like, as I said, very glossy, kind of very saturated kind of cover image there, kind of fits the album, I think, relatively well. And then you've got the track list there on the back. The inner sleeve is nothing special, it is just the lyrics on here, and then the label is on their usual kitchenware records, who they would remain with right up until, I think, 92, 93 sort of time, where I think I think I can only assume that kitchenware might have maybe, like, gone bust, I'm not sure. But yeah, that is the vinyl record looked at. So anyway, I will now go over each of the album's tracks in detail. I will score each track out of 10, and then use those scores to give us a overall percentage marking for the album. First track up is The King of Rock and Roll, the album opener, where I've got both the 12-inch single and also the 7-inch single box set to show. But I'll just talk about the song firstly, which I'm giving a 6 out of 10 to. Now, this is an unashamedly daft pop song, lyrically written from the perspective of a kind of washed-up kind of star who still believes himself that he's the king of rock and roll and that, like, he's all that, but sort of, like, really isn't, like, anymore, you know, and, like, is kind of leading a slightly, kind of tragic life. Like, the key line, like, in, like, the song for me is, "Now my rhythm ain't so hot, but it's the only friend I've got. I'm the king of rock and roll completely. All the pretty birds have flown, and now I'm dancing on my own," goes, like, one of, like, the latter verses, like, off, like, the track. So there's a real hint of, I guess, sadness. It's kind of washed up, kind of star, like, in, like, this track. But it also includes that very, very, very annoying chorus, which is supposed to be the kind of song, the kind of novelty song that, like, this, like, star, like, it was kind of, like, known for, like, the kind of, like, the hot dog jumping frog Albuquerque nonsense chorus, which is it's annoying, and I don't particularly care for the song, like, if I'm being honest. I think it's production wise very full on, lots of kind of bouncy, kind of bubbling kind of synthesizers on it, and it's just a little bit, I guess a lot of Prefab Sprout fans probably have a grudge against this song because it is their biggest single, like, in, like, the UK, where it reached number 7 on the charts, their only top 10 single here. So it's a bit ironic that also, like, well, actually, as I say, I've got note down here, like, they're only top 20 single, like, in fact. So yeah, it's a bit ironic that a song about a kind of one-hit wonder actually would become Prefab Sprout's only sizable hit, like, in, like, the UK, which is a real shame because it's a song which is just so unrepresentative, like, of the band. People often probably think of Prefab Sprout maybe like as a bit of a jokey band, like, you know, like, with a track like this. So that's maybe also why, like, I'm not a massive fan of it. But anyway, here's a 12-inch single here. It's just just a 12-inch single here. We got B-sides "Moving the River" from Steve McQueen, but then 2 non-album B-sides, a song called "Dandy of the Danube," which is really good, and then "Tin Can Pot," which I think is an earlier track because it's much more ferocious and rocking. Really good stuff there, actually. A really good quality B-side. But then I've also got this kind of 7-inch single box set here, which is quite nice. I'm not sure, like, if this is complete, but it's like a kind of, the lid comes off it. If I can, it's very difficult to do this, like, in a video. And then with this you get, and then this is just how they kind of package things up, like back in the 80s. You've got 2 little pin badges there, King of Rock and Roll, Prefab Sprout. two sort of postcards, which I'm not sure like if it maybe originally came with more, because two seems a bit like there's not a whole lot there. But yeah, it says this postcard could be sent anywhere from Langley Park to Memphis on the back of them there, which is quite nice. And then the actual 7-inch single there, which is just the standard 7-inch there. So yeah, nice little package there. It's like again a bit of a novelty collector's item, but quite nice to have it though.
Look at us now.
Okay, and the next track up is Cars and Girls, which was the first single released from the album. This is a great song. For me, it's my favourite track on the album. Lyrically, it's a bit of a piss take on Bruce Springsteen and his kind of song subjects, and what I think like McAloon described like as his naive escapism. It's basically just saying that, yeah, the world has got bigger problems and worries in it than Cars and Girls, which kind of, yeah, like I said, like tended to be the content of many kind of like Bruce Springsteen songs. But he does also say like in like the track as well, I guess this world needs its dreamers, but then follows that up with may they never wake up. So it's a very dismissive track like over Springsteen, and this single cover here kind of shows this kind of Springsteen-esque figure with a kind of lighted match like as its head there. So yeah, it's a great song, this, I think. Dates back a few years, so performed live during 1985, like 86 sort of time, and I must say I possibly do prefer those live versions. They just have a more raw kind of feel to it, sound a lot more like the kind of Steve McQueen album, personally. This one is very glossy, very full-on production, but it's still my favourite track like on the album though. Again, a couple of great B-sides on here. Vendetta and Nero the Zero are the two B-sides there. So yeah, that's Cars and Girls. As I said, this was the first single. Bit of a disappointing performance though, only got to number 44 on the charts there. So yeah, little bit disappointing for the lead-off single, but then, like as I said, King of Rock and Roll would be the second and would, yeah, kind of blow it like out of the water, like in commercial terms.
Nothing sounds as good as...
Okay, and then the third track on the album is called I Remember That. Now this one is a very kind of nostalgic kind of song lyrically, like, you know, in terms of it's basically just sort of about the kind of the wonder of collective nostalgia and that, and kind of sort of singing like, yeah, nothing sounds as good as us all remembering back like to like a time or something. It's just, for me, it's a song I just find difficult to relate to. It's a song which is done in this very kind of gospel kind of ballad style, and I just think is a little bit too like overblown like for me personally. McAloon very much disagrees with me like on that though. He actually described this as the best song that like he's ever wrote, but it's just too cheesy, too soppy for me, especially those over the top backing vocals and this kind of like slightly soppy kind of lyric. It's still an okay song. I would give it a 6 out of 10. I don't mind it, but it's certainly far from my favourite Prefab Sprout song like by any means. So yeah, we'll get a 6 out of 10 for I Remember That. Okay, and then the next track up on the album is Enchanted, which is one of the tracks that was produced by the band themselves, and it's quite an interesting sound, this one here. Like, I could have sworn this one had Thomas Dolby all over it, but he had nothing to do with this track, just because it's very well produced, this song, lots of synthesizers on it, but a very infectious melody though. I just find this track really catchy, and it's really grown on me since I've really been listening to this album. Slightly repetitive lyrics though. I think it's more of a vibe and a sound, this track, than an actual song. Like, if you were just to play this on an acoustic guitar, it would feel somewhat lackluster, but it's a track I always enjoy whenever I hear it. Lots of nice production, and all round a good track. So Enchanted for me would get a 9 out of 10. Okay, the next song up on the album is Nightingales, which was also a single. I think this was the 4th single they released, which again, I've got a copy of the 12-inch of it here. This one is a ballad. It's an odd choice for a single though, because it is just a very, very slow, very kind of soft sort of song, very much not going to get any real radio airplay like I wouldn't have thought. It's a nice track though, about a kind of sort of lyrically a kind of couple kind of questioning what their relationship is or trying to put a label on it. Some great lines like, "Are we a fireworks show, growing pale like a star burnt out years ago?" Or kind of, is there something more valuable like in like this kind of like this relationship? But instead kind of McAloon just concludes, well, we're probably just nightingales kind of just sort of flowing through life, kind of living like in the moment sort of thing. Notable guest appearance on this song, which is Stevie Wonder, who plays a harmonica solo. And this came about very much like by chance, like as Stevie was kind of touring the UK like at the time, and like Paddy McAloon like had written like this kind of solo, this very technical kind of solo, and he was kind of joking to like, I think like their manager or something, "Oh, it'd be great to get Stevie Wonder like on this track," and his manager said, "Oh, I actually know Stevie's manager, and he's playing like in the UK right now." So so yeah, they kind of got in contact, and Stevie didn't know Prefab Sprout, completely unknown, but listened to the song, liked the song, and like came along to like the studio and kind of played like on like the track, like overdubbing a few different solos in different keys, and they kind of melded it together. It's really nice, really adds a lot like to like the track. And for me, I'm giving it a 7 out of 10, which you might think is a little bit harsh for it, but it's just not a favourite track of mine. I just think it is. It's a little bit like I remember that, a little bit too adult contemporary for my liking. There's nothing really exciting about this song personally for me. It's pleasant though, but I'm struggling to give it like any more than a 7. This was, as I said, the 4th single released from the album, and it would unfortunately though stall at number 78 on the chart. So they definitely struggled to kind of replicate the success like of like the first 2 singles. Okay, we now flip over the album for what was the 3rd single. So yeah, like half this album was singles, which is quite mad to think about it. But like opener to side 2 is "Hey Manhattan" here, which is a really good song. This one here, I think particularly the standout with this track is the string arrangement, which is just gorgeous. Just adds so much to this song, which in itself is a little bit sort of show tuney for me, and it kind of almost, I don't say it drags out a little bit, but it's certainly it's the kind of, the string arrangement is really, really nice on it though, but lyrically could very much slot into any kind of musical about a kind of nobody arriving in like the big city and feeling, I guess initially a kind of sense of promise and optimism. He sings like, I feel like I own the whole damn place. But then the second verse becomes a bit more kind of cynical, a little bit more sort of showing the other half like of the city. He sings on it, he kind of talks about kind of poverty and kind of deprivation, singing "Scrounging Fifth Avenue, just to think the poor could live here too." And goes like the second chorus. So it's quite a clever song again, like that regard, kind of sort of contrasting the kind of two sides like of like Manhattan. Again, with this track, we've got a guest appearance. This one is got Pete Townsend on it, playing some acoustic guitar, which is a really nice touch. Again, a collaboration which came about more like by accident than by design. Paddy was too ill to attend the session, and Pete Townsend just so happened to be recording, I think, a solo album like in like the same studios. So Martin McAloon, the bass player like of like the band, plucked up the courage to sort of ask Pete if he would be willing to perform like on the track, which he was more than happy to do. So yeah, it's a really good song. Yeah, I said was released like a single, so I've got this 12-inch, and then also just recently picked up this 7-inch, which comes in quite a nice sort of poster sleeve, which I'll just quickly show here. So it's got a kind of its own little outer sleeve there, and then the 7-inch in there, and then a lovely little poster here, which just says what does it say? Yeah, guess what? Someone's arrived, I think it says on there. And then a nice little picture like of the band and all the lyrics to it there. So yeah, they definitely no expense spared with the kind of singles and the promotion. But again, a bit of a flop single. This only reached number 72 on the UK charts.
He swore he'd never leave her. He meant it.
Okay, and then the next song on the album, which wasn't released as a single, is Knock on Wood, and I can certainly tell why this one wasn't released as a single. It's a low-key kind of track, one of the Thomas Dolby songs. It's a ballad with a slight reggae tinge to it, very, very, very synth-heavy production on this one here, but unlike Enchanted, where I think it's got a bit of a groove about it and something interesting going on, this one just seems a little bit just seems very boring to me. It's got a slightly, stilted rhythm on it. Lyrically about the kind of ending off a relationship, he sings he swore he'd never leave her, he meant it till he did. It's just a boring, forgettable song for me. Definitely one of my least favourites on the album. So yeah, Knock on Wood would get a 5 out of 10. Okay, next track up is another single from the album, which again, I've got the copy of it here, which is The Golden Calf. Now this one is quite an interesting track. It's a bit of an outlier on the album, because it's reportedly one of their earliest songs, apparently from 1977, and I think there is a very early, very rough kind of rehearsal version of them doing it around that time, maybe a few years later, and it's just a bit hard to believe that they kind of sat on this song for basically 4 albums. It's not on Swoon, not on Steve McQueen, they didn't try and record it for protest songs either. This one's a raucous rocker. It's about as rocking as Prefab Sprout probably get, and I really like it. It's different for the album, and I think it stands out. McAloon does a great kind of vocal performance on it, self-produced by the band, but adds some much needed weight to the second side of the album. The only reason why I'm kind of dogging it a point on this one here is that it's just a little bit too long for me. It kind of stretches out to well over 5 minutes, and it's certainly got a lot of energy it certainly retains a lot of energy as it goes on, but I think it's maybe just got a slightly unnecessary bridge part to it that I seem so different these days, I can't believe it's me, and all that kind of bit. I could slightly do without that. I think if they kind of cut it down the length, they would have had a really tight, really solid rocking track here. So yeah, this was, as you can see, also released as a single, the 5th and final single from the album, released, I think, more than a year after the album came out, and it only got to number 82 on the charts, so a very disappointing performance there for The Golden Calf, which is a really good track, and one of my favourite Prefab Sprout songs, aside from its slightly over long length.
Nancy, let your hair down for me.
Okay, and then the penultimate song on the album is Nancy, Let Your Hair Down For Me, which is a real grower of a song. It's a track that I probably always just used to overlook, but now I think is a really, really good track. It's an interesting song lyrically about a kind of married couple who both share a workplace, and the wife is actually the boss of the husband at work, but it's very clever in the sense that it doesn't reveal itself as that until you get really into the song. It kind of starts off as a kind of what's the kind of lyric about a kind of he sort of says, I kiss my wife goodbye, I drive the bus to work each day, so that's the kind of setting the scene there. But then kind of he says, at the office no one's watching, can I catch an eye? So you think, is this guy having an affair here, is he cheating on his wife? But then by the time you get to the chorus, all becomes clear. The boss, the person who's caught his eye in the office, is actually the wife that he's going home with at the end of the working day. So it's a really interesting song for me, an interesting viewpoint lyrically. Musically a little bit run of the mill, a little bit easy on the ear, very similar to Nightingale's, I think, in that regard. So I would give it an 8 out of 10 because I do rather like the track, and it might possibly grow on me even more.
When you're scared of down and out,
Okay, and then the album closes with The Venus of the Soup Kitchen, which is must be one of the weirdest and most abstract kind of song titles going, which kind of match like the lyrics to like the track, like The Venus of the Soup Kitchen is waiting there for me, and all of us poor cripples who've been in the wars end up sleeping on the floor. And I guess it then kind of talks about kind of like sort of like a universal feeling of kind of suffering. He sort of sings like, hey, if something's hurting you, could it be it hurts your brothers too, from Langley Park to Memphis. So mentions the album sort of title, like sort of like in it, which I do quite like when albums do that. They kind of like mention the titles like a lyric, like from a song, rather than a kind of title track, like, or just a random title. So Langley Park is a kind of village in County Durham, kind of like where like the band are from, and of course Memphis is like Memphis. Like, so yeah, it's just, I think like the kind of like the juxtaposition like of like the two, which works quite well. Very odd arrangement this one though, which might need a bit of time to properly grow on me. It's a very meandering song, this. It seems to be a bit aimless, I would say, and then ends with this very overblown kind of choir. Seems like they're kind of just throwing ideas like at like the track and seeing like what sticks. And it's certainly an interesting song, you know. It's like an intriguing song, but it's not a song that I particularly love like yet. So I'm giving it a 7 out of 10, like at the time being, for The Venus of the Soup Kitchen. Okay, so overall this album would score 75%. So I would say this is a mixed bag of an album for me. There are some really good tracks on it, particularly Cars and Girls, Enchanted, and The Golden Calf. But then it's definitely on this album, feels like it's a classic case of too many cooks in the kitchen. The album it feels like it lacks a bit of cohesion, but also just too often gets into this kind of middle of the road adult contemporary feeling, which just isn't very exciting. It's a very glossy album, very well produced record, no doubt, but also just in places a little bit boring. Certainly for me, when compared to the other Prefab Sprout albums, it's not a patch on the first two albums. I would also say that the Aborted Protest Songs is stronger. It's almost like the complete opposite of this album. Rush recorded, not a lot of overdubs, just kind of like put out there very, very, very quickly, or kind of laid down very, very, very quickly. This one though, it feels like it's been laboured, it feels like it's been sort of like well produced, and it certainly has. But I would also probably say that the next album they do, Jordan the Comeback, is probably stronger kind of song for song. It's just got slightly more interesting and slightly weirder song ideas. This one just feels a little bit not like uninspired. I don't want to be harsh on this album, too harsh, but certainly there's just a few tracks on here which are a little bit boring, but then, like as I said, some really good moments on it too, and then a couple of slightly more annoying tracks as well. Yeah, King of Rock and Roll certainly fitting that bill. But anyway, I would be interested to know what you think of this album down below in the comment section, and yep, I'll see you all next time for the next video. Goodbye.